Hey everybody, I'm TecToss and welcome to episode 2 of TechTalk. And just to get it out of the way, because I've been asked in the comments what the actual name of the show is, this is it right here. You can see that, TechTalk. I know I've said different in the comments, I know I could delete it and look smart, but I won't do that. But it's tech because we focus on game mechanics mostly in the show, and that's what I want to keep it focused on. And tech just fits that. It's not about me, I just get a little ranty part in it. It's about, you know, getting into the game mechanics, talking about them, learning about them, and mostly getting into a discussion about them. Because in this format, while I can give you a little pointer and a little food for thought, I can't really cover the entire mechanics of a certain stage in a game. And that's true for Endless Legend, which is what I'm covering in these recent episodes. But it's going to be even more true when Hearts of Iron 4 comes out, or when we play some other Paradox crazy complicated strategy game. You can just, well, basically offer a topic for conversation and I can start it, but it's up to you guys to pick it up in the comments and actually make this show work, so we can actually get some knowledge under those comments. Anyway, today's quote is going to be from my favorite, or one of my favorite philosophers, Friedrich Nietzsche. I think he's called in English Friedrich Nietzsche in German. And I know what you're thinking. There's not that many who actually think he isn't regarded as a positive person. Let's say it like that. That's probably the diplomatic way. But I think he's misunderstood a good deal. And the quote I picked is because it also ties in today's show. But let's first hear the quote, and it's, "You have your way, I have my way. As for the right way, the correct way, and the only way, it does not exist." And that's not only simple, smart, and true, which, by the way, is one special skill Friedrich Nietzsche had, is just bringing things on the freaking point without any added softening and added information that just clouds the issue. He just focused on the issue and brought it on point in the shortest way possible. And this is what this quote is. And it's also just true. There's no right way to do things. And if you're stuck in just following what people tell you to do and what has been proven to work, you probably won't be able to find new angles, and you probably won't be able to find yourself in the work you're doing or in the education you're receiving. It's always good to try and do it your way. I think Frank Sinatra also had something to say about that. Anyway, but we're going to touch on that maybe later, and this is the quote for the episode. So let's get into it. What's up today? We're going to talk about game mechanics, and it's been requested quite a few times, and I've been asked quite a lot about it. So we're going to touch the early game, the mindset and strategy and the techs of Endless Legend, of course. In Tech's Talk has been renamed to Tech's Rant, because that's really more what it is, a chance for me to ventilate and get my anger out about certain issues. And today it's going to be being positive versus being realistic. And the comment of the week today is a tag team. Those of you who follow the comments on my videos probably know already who it is. And, well, we're going to get to that shortly. Now, before we get to the early game, let's look at the... I picked out 3 things you got to focus on, and let's see what they are. The start, and that's true for Endless Legend and Endless Space so far, is absolutely crucial in these games. If you have a bad start, some races won't even have the chance to recover from that. Like, for example, the Broken Lords, who focus so much on dust. If you don't get dust in your early regions, it's game over. So there's no shame in it if you just restart the game once, if you really get a bad start, and try and get a little better one. But also that implicates if you get a decent region, doesn't have to be great, it just needs to work. Like, you need to be able to do something. So sometimes you can get just screwed and then you restart the game. But that's not my advice. You need to have a good thought out start and follow the strategy that you map out, right? And that's crucial, because if you're not focused on the strategy you mapped out, you're gonna tack in one direction and then change your mind and tack in the other direction and then change your mind again, and you will lose the snowball effect that this game is about. So starting is crucial. Second, have a plan for tier 2 and 3. I know the early game is important, and I know the order in which you tech buildings and you build them and whatnot is important, but it's also connected to what you do in tier 2 and tier 3 techs. So you need to have a plan for that. You need to think ahead how you want to play, and it might not work. It might not work. So it's possible you'll think of a nice plan and like playing influence heavy, and you want to be the diplomat and you focus your techs on that, and then it turns out to be shitty. Well, that's okay, but have a plan, focus on it, and pull it through. And if it doesn't work, then you adjust. But if you adjust mid-game, you probably, unless there's a real good reason for it, and you probably won't make it work. And you probably not learn anything because you didn't really have a focus. So that's important. Of course, you still have to be flexible, and we're going to touch on that. But have that general plan and focus on it. Third, scout your surroundings before you make major decisions. The neighboring regions, the neighboring races, and most of all the resources you have available immediately are real important for how you play your early game. So you need to know about them, plain and simple. And the best way to do that is just split up your early army and have them run around and focus on getting to know your surroundings. Well, that's basically it. Because the regions you have around you are it's really important to take them into account. And as you can see in my Volto series, for example, I kind of devised a strategy on how to play them from what I had available. So you have to do that in this game, because sometimes you want to have a certain strategy, but if you don't have the strategic resource for it, well, too bad, you can't do it. Anyway, and there's two major ways to go about the game, at least I think. Maybe there's more, you guys can inform me about that, but for me that's building tall and building large, and we're gonna touch on what they are. So let's get into that. Building tall means you build a few large cities, and you have one small, maybe two, but one small but high-tech army, like a doom stack, so to say. And that playstyle is very viable as the necrophages, for example, because they can build tall so efficiently with their one population districts. It's also viable as the broken lords, because you can solve a lot of problems with your dust. For example, it's not that viable if you're playing the, let's say, the wild walkers, because they're really very good at expanding fast and early, and you need, if that's your racial focus, you need to actually take advantage of that and actually turn that into a strong suit. Anyway, so if you want to play building tall, there's a few early game goals you want to consider, and for one is find, again, it's tied in with the scoutings. You need to find the best regions fast, because the boosters really matter. If you have a smaller empire, you can fire more boosters because they're directly tied to how many regions you control. The cost of the boosters directly ties to that. So you really want to have the boosters that match your strategy. Like if you want to, you need to find, for example, you need to find more food and more, more food production based bonuses, like spices, for example. Yeah, that's a real important booster that you need for building tall, because if you take out the necrophages, all races need 2 population to be able to build a district for each district. So if you have 10 population, you can only build 5 districts, and that will severely limit you. So you need to grow your cities fast, and for that we need food, and for that we need boosters, because with just a regular tech it's a little bit too slow. So scout your regions. It's especially important if you're building tall, not that important if you're building large, and make the boosters work. Second, focus on tech buildings. You need to have a balance between teching and actually being able to build your buildings. But with building tall, you will also need a couple of you will need to advance through the tech tree a little faster, because you want your army to be high tech, and you also want the later FIDSI bonus buildings, like the what's it called? The tier 3 tech for food, something farms. I'm gonna touch on that later. I actually got a slide somewhere that says it, but I don't want to scroll around, so let's get to that later. But the plowing fields, I think something where you get plus population per plus food per population. You need that. You also need the public granary, like ASAP, if you want to build tall, because again, you need more population, so you need to take that into account and focus on it actually. And for that, you need to get through the tech tree at least until tier 3 pretty fast, and also you need to know what these strategic resources are, because that kind of determines of how tall you can actually build and how high tech your army can actually get. Because if you discover, and that's the next point, that you don't have any strategic resources around you, don't be too stubborn. I know I said earlier you need to have a plan and you need to have to stick to it, but if you don't have the tier 3 or tier 4 strategic resources to retrofit your army, you need to get aggressive earlier. And then don't be stubborn, but react to it. Do that. Stop growing population, focus on production, and get your army going, because that's actually a point where you can shift your attention. Like if you started out building tall and you got the public library fast, you got the geometry labs fast, you're teching fast, and you're in tier 3 now, and you got like your first couple of districts built, and you got like 2 cities maybe that are almost finished triangles, and you're ready to pile on that, and you discover, now you get to era 3, I don't have the resources. Don't get stubborn. Stop right there. You got a good base for production, and what building tall actually does is you build up a small high-tech army, and then you start taking enemy cities, and that's the way you expand. So if it won't work later on, you need to cut your losses and do it just now. Do it when you can. Get the tier 2 weapons and start working. Start killing those enemies and start taking their cities. So that's the message here. Again, if you build tall, you build few large cities, you aim for one high-tech army to start and take the enemy cities over with. You need boosters, and you need to tech fast. Right? That's what you want to take home. Now, building large, and I showed you the late Roman Empire as an example for a large empire. That actually focuses on building many cities fast, having a bigger military, because your empire is going to be large and you need to defend it. So you're going to need military on the right side and on the left side and on top and on the bottom. And yeah, for that, you're going to need more men. As for the early game goals, and we're going to breeze through them a little bit faster, it's going to be, you need to have more production if your empire is larger, for 2 reasons. For one, you need a military faster and earlier. And second, you're going to have a lot of cities, and they will need to produce buildings. So you actually need to have like the different steps of increasing your production. You can't focus on buying out because it's just too much to do. Right? So if you have 6, 7 regions, you can't just, if you're not the Broken Lords, you can't just go around and buy out all the buildings you need and basically buy a new city. You need to build that stuff with the other races, and thus you need production to actually manage that. And also your earlier cities need to constantly be producing military because you need to defend your empire. Because the bigger you get, the more points you have, the earlier you're gonna touch your neighbors, you know, have provinces adjacent to them, so they're gonna be more aggressive. And again, don't be stubborn. If you realize I got a lot of strategic resources for later on and you already focused on production and you already started your military, it's not at the end of the world. If you only have a few good regions, just build them up. Just stop the military production when you don't need it, and go towards the teching. So you can switch that focus in tier 2. But don't get stubborn and try and declare wars early when you really don't have the production, and you most of all don't have the retrofitted troops to actually support that. Now, for the early game techs, and I've marked this in here as a yellow, what I call golden triangle, these are the most important ones. And that's the cookie cutter techs, I would call them, is the mill foundry, the public library, and the granary, I think it's called. Oh, there's seed storage, sorry for that. The seed storage over here. Those are your most important techs, and you want to get them in the order mill foundry, seed storage, and public library. Now I took this screenshot as a wild walker, as you can see from this unit here. So we already get the seed storage, so that's why it's already researched. But usually, and that's what my philosophy for early game, you want to have production bonuses ASAP, as early as possible. If you want to buy it out, and you can actually afford it, you should go ahead and do that. Because the earlier you get a production bonus, the more it can snowball, and that is what this game at the moment, maybe it gets patched, but at the moment is all about. Getting an early advantage and snowballing it. And you need an early production for that. Well, depending on the difficulty level you play on, you're not going to be snowballing, but you're just going to try and catch up. But really, what it boils down to is if you start your production improvement early, the subsequent buildings which could also improve your production or improve your food output or improve your FIDSI overall will also be consequently produced faster, and you're going to save more time, get their benefits earlier, and produce the subsequent buildings even faster, and thus have a snowball effect. And the first early buildings that you can get that provide that are, again, mill foundry, seed storage, and public library. So you want to have those three in this order most of the time, unless you are severely limited in terms of being able to produce them, or in terms of you want to have a very different strategy and very different approach to the game. The next tech probably usually is going to be the mill foundry, just because it works the same way. You get a percentage-based bonus, 15% I think, or 10% extra dust, and you get a flat bonus on dust, +5 or so I think. So you want to get that as early as possible so it can snowball as much as possible. Now there's certain deviations from that start, and one is being what I call the money grabber, and you can go ahead, maybe get the mill foundry first. I'm still gonna stick to that you really need that early, but then get the search party immediately. So if you start in a region that supports a lot of early science output, it's very viable to go for the search party right away, and then have your troops spread out and try and grab as many ruins as you can in as short of a time as you can. And with a search party, you're pretty much guaranteed a steady income of dust and sometimes strategic resources, but oftentimes you're going to get a lot of dust, and you can then, when you get your golden triangle later, buy out those buildings and achieve a significant boost in your early economy. So that's a viable deviation from that, but it's only possible if you have enough science output for that. Because if you're attacking slowly already and you're going to make the stop over the search party, you're probably not going to be able to offset the early production and science output damage that you do to your economy. Now, if you're going tall, you won't need this sewer system, right? Because you're only going to have like maybe 2 or 3 cities early on. Likely, like 3 is usually a number you want to at least have, but not much more than that. And you won't need the sewer system right away because you won't have the time to start building districts right away. So you can delay that and jump straight to the market. Now, after you got that triangle and maybe the mill foundry in there, one tech you want to have early is the I forgot what it's called, the language square in the bottom here. I don't know if you can you see my mouse? Yeah, you can. So down at the bottom, this one here, which lets you take quests from minor factions and parlay with them, as it's called, and you want to get that pretty early on, because the other tags, like here the mining and the, I don't know which one's called open pit mine, but basically the mines for boosters and resources, you don't need the strategic resources early on. And the boosters, if they're not really great ones, like for example if you start in a region with 2 spice deficits. Maybe you want to aim for that early, but other than that, you can delay them a little bit and get the language square first, because that actually allows you sometimes to get ahead as well, because you get good bonuses from your quests, and it allows you to conserve military strength, because you don't need to fight those minor factions. Now, it's not an option if you're a necrophage, but for all the other races, it should follow pretty closely after the first couple of buildings. And if you're teching the buildings, of course, you're also going to build them, most likely in the order you tech them. And in the early game, there's no way to avoid having more buildings to build, and then you can actually finish in time. Like, you're going to have the mill foundry, and once you start that, you're going to get the seed storage, and then the library, and then the geometrical labs, which you should only get in regions where you really have like enough science output tiles that they become worthwhile, because they only give a bonus on top of already science output producing tiles. Anyway, so you're going to have a lot of buildings to build, and you won't be able to finish them fast enough until the next one gets researched. So just stick to what I told you. Take the mill foundry first, and then the subsequent ones are always going to be built faster. And then go for the seed storage, because again, that's going to pile on your production. You're going to get more people faster, thus produce faster. Also, you start in summer, so this bonus wears out. If you get this building too late, you might even want to wait until the first winter passed before you actually build it. And then get the language square. And one last thing. Don't you do it. Don't get the tier 1 weapon and armor. It just doesn't make any sense. You don't have the production capability to get a real early army, unless you maybe really focus on rushing. But I'm not going to discuss special strategies. I'm just going to discuss general sensible gameplay, so to speak. And those two, the tier 1 weapon and armor, they are just not worth it. You get tier 2 weapon and armor, which use the exact same strategic resources and are just superior. There's no reason. Basically, they're the same weapons and armor, but better. So there's no reason to get the tier 1. It's just going to be wasted time. And unless you get them per quest or you get them per default, like the Broken Lords, don't touch that. Don't get it. It's not necessary. Also, you can delay the ability, I think the Rookery it's called, to the hero market access, which I'm pointing at right now. You can delay that as well, because you won't have the dust early on. Now, how to go forward after you research your first tier 1 tech. Now, as you go on through your tech tree and you decided on which early game strategy you want to adapt, there are certain implications you need to consider. Like you can see here, I already selected parts of the Golden Triangle, and I've, for this tutorial purpose, picked the Wild Walker race, so they already had the seed storage, so we slightly variate the Golden Triangle with the Empire Mint, which is just as important, because again, it's a flat bonus coupled with a percentage-based bonus, and that's just strong for reasons I explained earlier. Now, once you got all the tier 1 techs you need, and really you just want to have the required 7 to reach Era 2, because there's a lot of techs in here that you really don't need, like the advanced alloys, like the advanced armor. Sometimes you might even want to skip the language square, though I might get criticism for that, but that's just the style I play. And so now you decided you want to grow tall, for example, so you don't need the early sewer system, which again, Wild Walkers get that anyway. What you do need, though, once you made those early game decisions, you need to get the central market fairly soon, because once you start the burrow building, your happiness will plummet. They cost you happiness, so you need to deal with that. And the central market is going to be a nice way of doing that. So you want to have that nice and early. Also, if you chose the tall approach, it's highly important to actually have enough population to build those districts. So you also want to prioritize the public granary. What is not so important, because you don't have that many cities, is probably buying out just yet. Maybe later down the road, but for you what is really going to be important is the central market, the public granary, and of course we need to produce these newly built buildings, or newly research buildings rather. So you want to have either the canal system, if the terrain warrants it, or you want to have the management sciences. Might even consider getting them both. And also you want to have the alchemy workshop. Workshop? It's workshop. Get it right, man. And that's one way of identifying the tech you need, and then around that you can just, you know, like with cooking, you can just add some salt and pepper. You can go for the more money route with the imperial highways. You could go for the for your bigger or for your second unit type, or you could just go for the imperial coinage, which, like I explained, is also valid because the boosters are easier to fire. They don't cost as much if you don't have that many cities. And you even want to consider what comes in Era 3. Because again, if you want to grow tall, you need that population, so you want to have the plow factory nice and early. You also might need the bread and circus. Sometimes you don't, depending on the anomalies you get. And so that's one way your tier 1 tech can implicate what you need in tier 2 and 3. If you want to grow big or grow broad, or you might want to get your early second unit because it gives you something to produce, and you will need to defend your larger empire. And you also might want to get the prisoners, slaves and volunteers because you might need to buy out some of these cheap early game buildings a lot if you get a lot of smaller, like early cities. And then you can buy that out, and the cities will be able to build up faster, getting the mentioned golden triangle of mill foundry, public library and empire mint, or seed storage, depending on the race you have and what's their starting requirements. And we could go on a lot about that, and I might even do a video about teching once I actually play through more races than I did and I feel a little more comfortable. But just to give you a sense for what difference it makes, the techs that you picked in tier 1. And yeah, so that should do it for this part. Now, the next thing you need to consider is, because you can't always stay peaceful, plan out your wars. You're gonna have enemies around you, and like every race around you is gonna be an enemy, except maybe for the rowing clans. I did not play them yet, but plan your wars accordingly. Identify who is most likely to cause problems, and have a wish list for how to deal with them. And a wish list usually is like an army composition you want to have. And for example, in my Voltos playthrough, I wanted to have a high initiative, high damage, ranged army. Idea being here that the melee-based are mages, because the AI, strangely enough, plays them melee-based, or they're gonna have a hard time reaching me before I actually kill them, because I act first and I am ranged, so I deal the damage and focus them down. And similar to that, you can have strategies for the enemies around you. For example, you can have infantry slayers against the what's their face, the necrophages, or you can plan for the disease immunity. Try and get the Silics in your army, and you know, build their Harmonites because they can't get infected, or stuff like that. Just have a wish list, have an idea where you want to go, and then go there. Now also you need to start on, unless you're on an island and you're alone, but you need to start building an early army to defend yourself pretty soon. I'm not comfortable putting out turns there, like you need to start it on turn 50, 40, 50, but it's around there. It really depends a lot on how much production you have, who's your neighbor, and it's a strategy game, right? And there's a lot of factors to consider, so there's no clear-cut answer. But as soon as you feel you got the basics, and that's the golden triangle, and maybe your first production improvement building, or from tier 2, like canal system, for example, maybe then it's the time to start building an early army. And remember, you can retrofit those guys, so just give them the regular tech that just costs production and no resources, and then later you can retrofit them and make them fit the enemy that you actually are fighting. But the AI, and it's especially true for higher difficulty levels, it's very aggressive early on, and also you might have an opportunity, like you might see an AI that's weaker, or their units don't compare well against yours, and then you already have an army and you just need to retrofit them and send them to kill. And also you need to get your army commander some experience. So if you get an early army, you can put a commander on it and have them run around and kill roaming armies. Farm a little XP that way. Now this is different for large versus tall empires. Like I mentioned, if you are building large, you probably need a lot more armies. So you probably want to start that earlier, and you want to have garrisons as well. Because except for the vaulters who can teleport around, or the cultists who only have one city, you're going to have long ways to walk, and long ways could be in the area of 9 to 10 turns to reach the city on the left side from the city of the right side, or something like that. So that's not feasible. Like if the enemy attacks you, they won't wait 10 turns, they'll just siege your city and take it. And then you need to retake it, and you lose all that valuable production and dust. So have multiple armies, and don't stop building armies if you're building large. And the way you can achieve that is get a couple techs that are passive. Get the +1 minor faction slot, get another unit type to be more diverse, get the larger garrisons, get the bread and circus. Those are all techs you can get and you don't have to build. So you can improve your overall strength while not doing anything other than building armies. So that's the way you can do that for large empires. While when you're playing tall, you only need one stack that can reach all your cities, and then you're going to stop army production and go straight ahead and tech, and use all that production for getting more tech buildings, making your cities bigger, stronger, and because it's easier to defend them. And that's what I just said. Plan your techs accordingly. Also, plan your regions. If necessary, because the game sometimes gives you regions who are really focused on one type of resource, specialize. Sometimes that's necessary. And also, if you want to get governors, you want to get them early. And so they can level up and they can actually earn back the dust that they cost, because they're freaking expensive, let me tell you. Now, you also need to balance tech and production, but I just skipped through that because I touched on it a couple of times. And that basically means what I earlier said. If you're building an army and you can't spare time to build buildings, well, just get techs that you don't need to build that just overall improve your empire, like the ones I listed. And if you're building tall, you can tech a lot faster, and you can actually build the techs a lot faster. Get governors early, and on small maps there might be a case, if you start with not that much dust and you're production focused, there might be a case for not getting governors early. Now, it says governors, not heroes, because you will need army commanders, and they're going to be viable mostly no matter when you get them. But governors, they're expensive and they need a lot of time to actually pay for themselves. So you need to get them early, unless they have some ridiculous bonus, or unless you actually need a city that can just churn out units non-stop, and you need a governor to actually make that kind of production happen. On small maps, it might even be possible it's not worth it at all, because the games are too short for the governors to pay for themselves. And I think there was a forum thread touching on that, and if I can find it, I'll put it in the video description. But just keep that in mind. If you want governors, think about which ones to get, which cities you want governors with. Like cultists, for example, are awesome governors. And then just try and get them as early as you can. Put them on the city and be done with it. If you get them mid-game, I know I do sometimes in my Let's Plays, but that's just because I can, right? Sometimes you get in a position where it doesn't matter if you spend an extra 400 or 1,000 dust. So I just get a governor, because it makes the city better even later in the game. But if you want to be maximum efficient, just get them early, and then later don't bother with it. Just get the heroes for army leading. And don't artificially specialize. Like, the game is, at the moment, sadly, built in a way that there's like an optimal build, and that you just get every building available. There's no need to specialize, and there's no benefit from specializing, unless the region dictate. Like, if you got a region that doesn't have much production but has a lot of science, well, you maybe want to just get them a basic set of buildings so they can grow a little bit, and then just give them the science buildings and be done with it. And you maybe need to buy out those buildings, and then just don't touch that region. It's just going to produce science, and that's it. But it's kind of rare. Mostly you can find a spot where you get all the resources, all the fidzi, and then you don't need to specialize. You just need to get all the buildings in all the cities, because it's actually good to do. There's no real downside to it. They cost maintenance, yeah, but it's not enough to really make it an issue. Alright, that now does it for the game mechanics, and it's already way longer than I anticipated, and I could go on for, I don't know, maybe another hour. So please tell me in the comments, is that enough to get you going for the early game? Is there a topic that you need to know more about, especially for the early game? Not for the you can also, of course, give me suggestions about, topics that I should touch on, but specifically for the early game. Did you get a good idea? Because for me, it's even hard to get out what I think about the game sometimes, because I just do it. I just play, and it just flows. But really, you guys are the one who watched the video and you want to learn something from it, so tell me if there's anything specific I need to touch on, and I will be a good boy and do that. Now let's get to the fun part, to the tech rant today, and that is, as you can see, the faction of positive thinkers, and those are kind of a red flag for me. And to give an example, what I mean by that is, you hear sentences like, or the quotes and sayings like, "Carpe diem," use your day to the fullest, live every day as if it was your last. Right? You hear that stuff. A positive attitude leads to positive results. Just visualize what you want. Visualize it, and it's gonna happen. You are wonderful. You get blasted by that horse shit every day. It's around you. People say that's the way to think, that's the way to get stuff done, that's the way to get your energy and to go into the day and be successful. Now, maybe one day I'm gonna do a paint my life thing, but I can give you a teaser. I didn't have a very easy life until the last couple of years, maybe. There's a lot of mistakes and a lot of things I regret, and a lot of just stuff that I needed to get through and needed to deal with. And none of that crap does work if you really need it. The positive thinking, it works if you're already successful, or if you're already in an environment that, there's not many obstacles. But if you're really down and you really need to get yourself up, that won't get you anywhere. You can't just be positive on command. You can't just think positive. What I suggest for you, be realistic and understand what that means. That doesn't mean being negative. That just means seeing what is available to you, being realistic about what you can do and what you can achieve, and then go ahead and do it. It's that simple. There's no need to pump yourself up. There's no need to be overly positive and ooze positivity in the world, and then the universe is going to give it back. It's not what's going to happen. You're going to give positivity, and people think you're annoying, and that's all there's going to be to it. So really, be realistic. See what you can do. Get your ass up and do it. That's all. You only need to be able to be your own drill sergeant. And I've heard a speech recently where a woman talked about being productive and getting yourself in the mood and getting energy to actually do something. And she identified a 5-second rule. And she said, if you got an idea and you got energy to do something, and I know you viewers know that, I know that. Everybody has that. You get an idea, you think, oh God, that would be great if I just went ahead and go jogging, go swimming, whatever. Clean up my room because it's messy. And you feel that energy and you feel, that would be great. If you don't act on it in 5 seconds, it's gone. Plain and simple. So that's the only thing you need to consider. Again, I know I'm overstressing it, but be freaking realistic. Don't expect to be the next Pavarotti. Don't expect to be the next Picasso. There's few people who really have the potential to be geniuses. Just see what you can do, see what you're actually motivated for, and then take the 5-second rule and get your ass up and do it. And that way you're gonna have a lot of success, and you can get out of a lot of tough situations if you just take it step by step. And you don't need to be a happy bear, and you don't need to spread love around you. Really, just be realistic and get your ass up. I think I made my point. Let's move on to the comment of the week. And this time it's actually a tag team effort by, and I probably know you guys already suspected that, but by Ronan265 and by Michael Soave. He didn't correct me last time I mentioned his name, so I guess I'm spelling it correctly. And what those two guys did is, on the first video of the Broken Lord series, get into a deep discussion about the early game and about my starting positions, where it all started with, because I was unsure where I should settle. And reading back those comments, I'm still a little unsure, because so far my production versus dust approach kind of works, but we'll see in the long run. And so those two guys got in an argument. And instead of doing the usual on the internet, where you just get to, oh, your mother sucks sailor's cock, and then you just, oh, you're gay and you're a faggot, and oh well, but I'm more beautiful than you, and you know, stuff like that. What's usual on the internet. Those two guys did what's actually reasonable and productive. They got into an analysis of buyout costs and actually looked up some stats, and just, you can read those comments yourself and see that. And they got in a great discussion about the implications of having more dust versus having more production will have on your early game and overall strategy, and then over the course of the game. And I want to thank you for doing that, first of all, for being so mannered and just, you know, picking out the facts and discussing about them, and not get personal and not get like, your idea sucks, you're stupid. But I think the word stupid was mentioned there. I guess. Second, for actually putting the effort and having that discussion out in the open, because you could just go on Skype or go on Facebook or whatever and have that discussion in private. And you guys actually did in the comments, and everybody can read it now and learn a little bit about the game. So thanks for that. And also, since we're at the end of our second episode of Tech Talk, thanks for watching, and tell me about the length actually, because this one was a little bit longer, but I feel it's warranted because early game is such a complicated topic. Even cut my rant short. I know, right? What I do for you guys, it's unspeakable. Like, even Jesus would blush. Maybe not. Anyway, tell me in the comments, and please get engaged in the comments and talk about the early game, because it's really important in this game, in Endless Legend, and it's so complex and there's so many implications, and maybe some stuff I really didn't touch on enough, and some of you who are really good at the game can get into. So hope to see you guys in the comments. Also, if you enjoyed it, put a like, and if you didn't yet subscribe but watch this video until this point, really there's no excuse. Just click that subscribe button and be done with it. Also, have a wonderful day, and I'll see you around for the next episode, which is going to be next week. Until then, goodbye.